Welcome to the Designing Hollywood podcast in association with the John Campea Show. I am your host, Robert Meyer Burnett. Today's episode is sponsored by the Eastern Costume Company. Today is a very special episode of Designing Hollywood. We are here to celebrate Rebel Moon, Zack Snyder's sci-fi opus, part 1 of 2, and I have with me Philip Boutte. Philip, welcome back to being my co-host. Actually, I've just interviewed you, and we did a live show together at an event, but we've never actually been on the show together.
I'm very excited. Thank you for having me.
Jason Pastrana is here with us. Jason, welcome to the Designing Hollywood show.
Thank you.
And your costume designer, who her list of credits, the geek cred that she brings to this show, I can't even. Stephanie Porter, welcome to the Designing Hollywood show. And it's true, your nerd cred runs deep.
I'm very proud of.
Out of that. Nerd cred.
And then, of course, Jason, you know, it's funny. I have a feeling I asked you this question before, but I want to. We always start these shows asking how people got involved in the film industry, and something tells me you actually, interestingly, came from gaming.
That is true. This is actually probably my 4th film project that I worked on, Rebel Moon. And before that, I worked in AAA games, worked on Firaxis. They made Civilization. I don't know if you heard of it.
Yeah.
Strategy games. And I was part of the mobile, like when mobile games was a thing. I worked at Zynga, which was like, they
Sure.
started the mobile game industry when it started. So I've had about 13 years of an artistic career in gaming, and it's gone through different kinds of winding roads to get, like, I've done 3D. I was a concept artist. I was a user interface artist. I even did a little bit of programming in user interface. So it's a lot of different roads that led me, I feel like, to where I'm at now in my career, which is film, which I really love. So does that answer your question? Was that a question?
No, that was, and Steph, yeah, it was great. And now, Stephanie, you know, how did you get into this crazy business, and was costume design something that you were always interested in? Because everybody kind of has a circuitous route. Did you grow up? Were you sewing? I was interviewing somebody yesterday. They were making clothes for their dolls when they were a little kid, and it led them into costuming.
I mean, yes, definitely. It's always been the goal since I was, I think, 19. But prior to that, I made clothes. I had a little clothing line when I was a teenager, selling at Grateful Dead concerts.
Nice.
And it's like that combination of structural and dimensional building fascination, like trying to make a thing where there was no thing before, and also like sewing and crafting and building and making in general. And then, of course, like history, psychology, wondering why people wear what they wear. That whole thing. I went to UC Santa Barbara, started as pre-med microbiology, and quickly switched into costume design when I realized that was a thing that people could do and earn a living. Stayed in theater until I was 24, and then got a job designing a film in Ashland, Oregon, where I was working at the Oregon Shakespeare Festival. And from that film, I came to Los Angeles, and I was Colleen Atwood's PA on Planet of the Apes. And then from then on, stayed in town and just worked on whatever I could work on.
Yeah, I mean, I just want to throw out some names, but Planet of the Apes, Tron Legacy, Sucker Punch, Green Lantern, The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, Django Unchained, The Hunger Games, Batman v Superman, Dawn of Justice, X-Men Apocalypse, Justice League, Free Guy, Matrix Resurrections, which, by the way, I love that movie. I don't care what anyone says. I think it's great. And Top Gun Maverick. I mean, come on. That's a heck of a career. And amazing work. Well, Philip, you also came from illustration and design. So how did you also fall into the industry? How did you get here?
That's a good question. I think what's interesting is whenever you ask this question to everyone, they have a different answer, right?
Yeah.
Like, there's always a different path. I've been in the entertainment industry since I was 3. I was an actor from 3 until about 17, working and being in entertainment. So my love for entertainment kind of started there. It's like my formative years were all spent either doing television stuff or whatever it was. And so when I went to college, I didn't really necessarily want to do acting. I wanted to see if I could focus on behind the scenes. And so I focused on illustration and film, and the way to combine those together, everyone's like, be a production designer. So I was production designing for a long time and doing music videos and commercials and all of that stuff, and kind of like getting into that field. Which is why another reason why I knew who Zack Snyder was, because he was like a hero in that world because of his visuals. You were just like, oh my God, this guy's amazing. So we'd follow and model all our stuff after him. And I think that once I got past that point, on a luck of a thing, I went to Comic-Con, San Diego Comic-Con, when I graduated, and I saw a panel of costume designers. So it was like Isis Musindin and Juliana Makovsky, and I think Mary Vogt. And I showed them my portfolio, and they were like, you should join the Costume Designers Guild. And so that's how I kind of got in from there. And then I joined the guild. I got hired a month after I joined by Sonia Hayes to do The Mummy 3 with Jet Li and Michelle Yeoh and Brendan Fraser. And then I've just been working ever since. I've worked with designers. I've worked with Stephanie. I've worked with a bunch of different designers and concept artists across the board. And so my history there really kind of helps inform me how to also talk about design and costume with guests.
Well, Stephanie, this film, there are so many different costumes. There's so much different world building. I don't even know how the two of you would begin a project like that. So, Zack Snyder is known for, hell, I have Sucker Punch action figures, Hot Toys Sucker Punch action figures. So I would say that one of the great things I've always loved about Zack Snyder's films is his costume design. I would imagine Rebel Moon being the magnum opus that it is. How did the two of you start on the film? Where did you begin?
Well, when you are starting with a brand new, there's no source material, it's
right.
Brand new canon. The first reaction as somebody who is a creative, I'm speaking like from my perspective, is holy moly, that's so exciting. Like literally we can do anything. And then you sit down to like do anything and you realize, wow, like it sometimes is helpful to have like a time frame or a place or a whatever. So I think what I tried to do, and Jason and I were, from day zero together, kind of like embarking on this journey together and working with Zack, is to boil all of the characters down to that like emotional reaction, the emotional reaction that the characters are meant to give the viewer, and to find things that are in our modern day earthling frame of reference library to pull from, like shapes or colors or proportions that we can utilize in a new and a different way that still makes sense, that's still not like ridiculous where it's distracting from the story, and encourages the character's arc and objective and doesn't inhibit the performer's ability to do their work. And the cool thing was, as these ideas were coming along, informed by the script, by our frames of reference, and Jason was creating these amazing illustrations and pieces of concept art, and we were sharing with Zack, and even through conversations, I think we were on a very similar track separately and coming together, finding the right, like when the right look, when the right proportions, colors, etc. clicked, it really clicked. And when it didn't feel quite right and it just, not sure if that's it, like you kind of feel, that it's not right, and you just keep going until it clicks, and it clicked across the board for everything. I think that's the best way to describe it.
Jason, when you did you break the script down in terms of races and the Imperium and the all the different factions, and did you start there, or I mean, where does working with the production designer on a project of this scope and talking to Zack, I mean, what was the first thing you sketched? Do you remember?
Well, for starters, I would say the art process started really early for this pre-production. I think while parts of the scripts were even made, so there was a lot of like bobbing and weaving as the scripts were being developed that would inform the art, and then another part of the art department would create the ship, and that would inform the helmets on how to create helmets. For instance, like the soldiers' helmets were inspired by the ship design, and like early on, it was just really blue sky. And one of the things I love about Zack Snyder is that he has a loose vision at first of what he wants, and he lets you and Stephanie really explore what these characters can be, and then we start to hone in on those little details as the story develops, the ships and the iconography. I mean, like we were getting stuff. We had what was the guy's name that created the mythology of the
Adam Foreman.
Yeah, he was like the heart of the whole thing, I would say, because like that he like literally created a religion. And I hope they unpack this a little bit more in part two and the different cuts. But there's so much mythology in the story, and that informed the costume design and the patchwork and the color work, of what it means. And it was a beautiful process. And it literally starts with just one character at a time. And then once that's done, you put that to the side loosely. While you're working on this guy, you might have to go back to this guy over here, change a few things about that character. It's back and forth until it's like harmoniously kind of created, like that sounds a little cheesy, but but
true.
All these characters. So it really is just it's really non-linear at first, and I like that personally. So,
Stephanie, for you, when you read the script for the first time, was it daunting? Did you go like, "Oh my God, how much am I gonna have to do?"
No, it was exciting. I think it was exciting first, and then
and the budget.
My favorite, yeah, right. No, but my favorite part of the film process, I think Jason has heard me say this 1,300,000 times, but my favorite part of the movie making process is the beginning, when anything is possible and you're just coming up with ideas, and the shooting schedule's like way off in the distance, and like you know what kind of shops and facilities you're going to have, and like the budget is this like non-real thing, and then slowly reality starts to settle in, and you realize what your limitations are. And another thing that I'm sure Jason has heard me say a million times is that limitations build creativity. So if we only have like X amount of dollars or X amount of time, or we have to do 100 of these things and there's only this amount of fabric, like that challenge is a challenge that I find exciting. Like let's figure it out. Like how can we make it work with what we have?
What is the process you go through with Zack Snyder in terms of when do you present things to him? Is it an iterative process? Are you presenting work to him the whole throughout the process, or do you just tend to show them things that give them a couple of choices and say, this is where we're going?
No, I like to have meetings, especially in the beginning, every single week. And while Jason and I will prepare so much stuff, and like Jason was saying, like, because Zack's vision, like, he has an aesthetic, right? Which so happens to be awfully similar to an aesthetic that I really gravitate towards. We can kind of see as things are like developing and becoming more in focus, we can see what Zack is going to respond to. And so, we'll show him stuff that we want him to respond positively to. And also, like, if we're stuck on something, maybe we show him where we're at, so that it's like a conversation, like for him to weigh in, and work off of his response to kind of direct us where to go.
One of the things to add to what you just said, like, I've worked with a lot of directors before, and a lot of directors or art directors in the game industry, and a lot of art directors, I would say, don't know how to take what you have and take out the parts that are not good and add the things that are good. Sometimes they just say, scrap the whole thing, start over, And one of the things I like about Zack is that he, when we were showing things, if we weren't slightly off, not to his vision, it wasn't a start over thing. It was like a remove this, add this, and I think we're good. I think it's getting in the right direction, and I really appreciated that, because it was easy. It was easier to iterate and pivot in the art process to move forward, because there's a lot of characters. We got to move forward, and there's production timelines, and we got to keep moving forward with these characters. And I think that it was a great experience with him. So, yeah.
Well, there's so many different factions and planets and civilizations. How do you keep track of it all? Like, once you started were there like big boards somewhere where somebody could walk in and go, okay, here's what planet we're on and here's what the people look like?
Yeah, I made boards for literally everything. That's my love language, is like big giant boards with lots of beautiful things on them to like surround yourself. And also for our costume crew in Los Angeles, in our design office, like, we made copies of those boards so that they were up literally everywhere. So everywhere you looked, you could see that on, in this world, this is what the vibe is. This is what people look like. And here's why. So we'll show like the aesthetic, the industry, the, socioeconomic kind of basic structure, just to be like totally immersed. So, it familiarizes. And then I also had sort of like on my office wall, like a checklist of the 14 worlds that we covered. And as we would go through and shoot one, you kind of tick it off the list.
That was going to be my question, is did you have two crews? So were you guys split between, or did you have your main crew and then like an on-site crew, or was it everything being built in the same place?
We literally did everything in-house, with the exception of maybe multiples, which were some like
my next
really specific specialty stuff.
Okay. Because I was curious, because there's a lot of custom work in this project.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know about how many custom pieces you guys made, like total or around? It just seemed like a lot.
Tens of thousands.
That's what I thought. Yeah, because that's actually a big. There's so much specialty stuff in there, especially like even just one of my favorite costumes. I think it's the Imperium, like the priests, or the red. Can you guys talk about the creation of that? Even like the helmet, the three eyes, and all. It's beautiful.
Yeah. So I shared with you guys the photos. About that, but it's basically, they're called scribes in the film. We call them. What do we call them? Priest or whatever.
They're under the umbrella of priests, and then there's scribes that record the history, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah.
So with that, you know, the way Stephanie works is she'll have a set of photos or inspirations using Pinterest or whatever, a board of the feeling that she wants with these characters. And for that, I would say for that particular piece, I took a little bit more liberties with it. You know, kind of creating a, because like the faith or the mythology of this world is a major part of it. So much so that even the scientists in the film, if you watch the film, I don't know if this is spoilery, but they kind of wear the same.
So I'm just saying, spoiler alert. You can go ahead and say
Spoiler alert. But the science and mythology both wore similar costumes, like the scene where they're resuscitating Noble or whatever. The scientists are wearing similar costumes, so it was an important part of that. So religion and science were part of the language of this costume. So it's, a lot of Stephanie's images were based on that, and also for John Foreman. You said, what's his name again? The guy who did the John Foreman. Adam Foreman.
Adam.
So a lot of the mythologies, the iconography of the costume and the lettering and stuff like that would come in. It was like all this, it was like in a nice package for me, and it started off as just quick thumbnails and just to get a feel for it, and then honestly, I work pretty fast, so I'll go straight into the rendering, and if we need to like change things, I can change it on the fly. But that I'm particularly proud of that piece. Yeah. Do you want to add anything?
No, I think like the evolution of the priests and how, so the emotional response that you're supposed scribes, the emotional response is not meant to be warm and fuzzy, like a religious, you know, like a father or like a rabbi that makes you feel kind of like safe and nurtured. It was meant to be kind of the opposite of that. And so using that as like the very baseline, and we were exploring with like these foreboding, like hard shapes, like different like silhouettes, so that from a distance you would know exactly what was headed your way. And then I think Zack at one point, like we were getting there with like shapes and silhouettes and over, you know, the overall kind of like emotional response to it. And then Zack was like, what if they were red? And Jason and I were both like, oh my God, holy moly, obviously they need to be red.
To me, it does what good sci-fi costuming does, or what good sci-fi does, which is if you were far away, from far off, you could read like that's some religious figure. You can just tell just based on the shapes, it feels like a pope or something. There, that iconography is there. But as you get closer, there's first and second read. So first read would be like a priest or a scribe or something like that. Then second read, you start looking at all the details and you're like, what's that? And it's a depth thing where it brings depth to the costume by just being a first read, priest, religious figure, second read, what is that? And I think that that's such a successful thing.
Thank you. Yeah, no, Jason, go. And then, yes.
So hopefully this will be explored more in part 2. I think it will, but the frame these priests are holding has a very deep meaning to it, and those little white things are actually teeth. Okay, I know. All I'm saying is that there's like way more to it than
there's way more to it.
Yes, and hopefully it explored more in part 2. Yeah,
and that's, you know, I think yes, for sure.
Did I say too much? I said too much, didn't I?
I don't know. I'm paranoid. I've done, you know, the DC and the Warner Brothers. Like you were really.
Where you're just like, yeah.
It's like in the DNA at this
point. The
point.
Netflix police are shutting us down as we speak.
Yeah.
Whoever's editing this, just remove the word teeth right when I say it.
Yeah. Don't know what you mean.
You're all good.
But like like the audience is so important. Like the people that, you know, admire Zach's work, the people who have the action figures on their shelves and read the books and like do the freeze frame zoom in, like those are my people. And creating a costume that has, like what you were saying, Phil, that like there's the quick read of, okay, that's not a good guy, and then the zoom in quality of like, oh, there seems to be something written along the border, and that's not a language that I understand. It's like we live for creating the depth that speaks to our audience in whatever way they choose to engage with it. Because I'm that person. I'm the like, the overthinker, the nitpicker, like, why is that, like down to every last little detail. That's important, really important.
I did a good job there for sure.
So, well, I'm just curious about when you were shooting. I would imagine it was more like, more like a Lord of the Rings thing where they were shooting everything together, or was part 1 and part 2? Were you block shooting, or was one film its own entity and the next part was its own entity? How did that work?
So it's set in location based, probably like episodic television, the block shooting.
Right.
To be able to do more with less, which is the new theme in filmmaking. We have to be ready kind of for anything at any time. And based on like what sets were ready when, and whether the set, when you look at it this way, is one world, and if you look at it this way, it's another world. We need to be ready for every single thing for that way of shooting.
Other people got paid to do that part. We just did the art part.
No, dude, I'm in the workroom every day.
Yes.
The scheduling part, I mean, the scheduling, like which actor goes where, like, oof, that's too much.
Yeah.
Well, you guys had a pretty great cast, pretty diverse, different kinds of actors from around the planet. When you're developing the costuming, how is your relationship with actors, and how do the actors then define the costumes themselves? And did you make changes based on who was cast?
Jason, do you want to speak? I mean, I have lots to say on that, but Jason,
I don't know what I'm about to say. Yes.
I will say, I know this is a hard question for them because it happens to us so often in costume. Like it'll be to the extreme of they'll give the costume designer something, and from concept, right, you're drawing this character and it's like The Rock. And then they'll be like, oh yeah, The Rock's schedule didn't line up. Now it's Kevin Hart. And they're like, what? Like it's such a different person. And you have to try to like move your costume from one person to another or completely start over because it doesn't fit the vibe of who that person is anymore.
I think sometimes it's like something as minor as like, can I have my collar opened up in this scene?
Yeah, that's like, well, that's kind of what I was thinking, more along the lines of once the cast is set, and not, but in terms of an aesthetic thing, when you bring an actor in and you've made a design or something, and they actually start to be fitted, and you put them in, that you make changes based on the actor, or the actor might ask for something, and performance wise,
150%. And I think because this is new, completely new, all of these performers are establishing these characters, and they're establishing these characters because of who they are as performers. So I like to blur, a little bit of the line between performer and character, not like, whack you over the head with it, but, it's important, the conversations we have in the fitting room, both because of, a performer's action that they have to do. They need to be able to like reach their right arm up and like, do this thing. And so we'll have to make an adjustment to the costume so that motion is, and also for their proportions, the way that their body is built. We want to make sure that everything looks the way that it's supposed to. And also aspects of their ancestry that they feel make them who they are and what they bring to their performance of this character. So you'll see, Sophia Boutella's ancestry is North African, and there's so much really interesting iconography. And just in having conversations with her, I pulled some of these like colors and shapes and proportions from North African women in particular, and embroidered into her costumes in small elements at certain points in the story. Jaimin, who plays Titus, is his ancestry is African, and in a part of Africa where there is this wrestling gosh, I don't even know how to, it's performance, it's wrestling, it's like steeped in the history of thousands and thousands of years, and you like it's incredible. And that was important to him, and he brought some of that into his character of Titus. So we brought some of the visuals of that into his character's costumes. There's Beninese, Senegal, Benin,
Senegalese, yeah, it's Senegalese wrestling. It's called Lute, or Lutte, I believe. I know that from Black Panther. It's the like research.
I'm learning a lot just listening to you now. I forgot about that. Like, yeah, that was part of the inspiration for
you
that.
You can see it in his costume. You can see that. Like, that's why I think it's interesting to talk about you guys as mood boards, because as it comes back to you, right, and you recognize, like, you can tell even I think what Robert was trying to bring to light was that each character has this like base, right? And then you kind of expand it conceptually outside of that.
Yeah.
But you can see those influences. And I think that that's something that people need to understand is like, this one's Senegalese wrestling, but then this one is something else, or this one's from World War whatever, or like, it's like all that. And the base is kind of there, and then it expands outward. And that can be greatly daunting if you don't have, like Stephanie said, the mood boards and the history and something to kind of like latch each person onto, right? Because then it can get tricky.
Yeah, they need to get excited for it. They need to own their character, and this is just a way of them owning him. Like, a little part of them is in it. So.
Who did you guys base the Blood Axe family off of? Or like what was their inspiration? Because they have that cool kind of face painting and the dreads and all that. Like, where did that come from?
So I knew this is one of those things where casting, I knew that Ray was going to be Darian Blood Axe. And, I did a film a few years ago called Prey, which follows a band of Comanche people, pre-contact, contact adjacent-ish, and studying the Native American war paint, and also the I'm blanking, the film of Jamestown. And sorry, this is please cut this out because my brain has gone totally blank and I sound like an idiot.
Is it a recent film?
But essentially the idea of war paint, like adding an additional level of aggression and intention.
Sure. And
Ray's intensity as a performer, plus the intensity of intention with the war paint, which our makeup department did a fantastic job of taking our concept and like improving upon it, which is all we can all ever hope for in the world. They did a magnificent job. And like pulling, if you look closely at the Blood Axes, we're pulling kind of the boiled down essence of a tribal elements from tribes all over planet Earth, of every, everywhere, north to south, east to west. And because it's this kind of ragtag, mixed together visual stew, their armor and their protection is also kind of the outer space universe version of a mixed stew, like found objects that had other use intention, and I know that their weapons from the prop master also was taken from a lot of different worlds. So they're a ragtag. This might be a little like this is the kind of like overthinker. Kintsugi, which is the Japanese art of visible mending, specifically with repairing ceramic with gold. And the idea is having something that is fractured and repaired not only makes the piece stronger but more beautiful. And that's kind of our running theme with all of our heroes, all of our rebels, all of our resistors, is these are all fractured people. And the way that they pick themselves up and put themselves back together, you can see how they've done it, and it makes them more beautiful and stronger because of it. So that's kind of the Blood Axe is taking that idea and like really going for it.
There's multiple different factions, and you've got a whole political system, and when you're doing that, do you also then have to develop and go deep into, you were talking about the guy who creates the mythology and everything, do you do some kind of a lineage, like, okay, this uniform has developed over the course of this much time, so if you wanted to, you could go back and say, okay, this is what it looked like 100 years ago, and we have this evolution up to this point?
Do you want to talk about?
Do it, Jason.
I hope you guys show insert image.
Okay.
But like one of the images that I showed was the flashback armor of the soldiers, which was like the height of this military, where you can see all the details in mythology in their armor in gold engraving, very inspired, like Romanesque, like very detailed gold. And then you flash forward into like the beginning of the movie where it's like military color, and it's been sanded down, painted, sanded down, painted, sanded down. The details, you can barely see the details. You understand that it's it's to give the idea that like this military has lost its way, including the character, the actor. You can kind of tell he's kind of rebellious, and in part one, and like even their attitude is very much like sort of jarheads in the space jarheads. So that was the idea of like that progression. And there's even a further progression I made where like their armor is like, I guess I'll show this art later, but it's like defaced, like there's like graffiti on it, on parts of it, and where like you can tell like locals are being like graffitiing these soldiers, So it's the progression of the armor for me is something that really tells a story of this military and the world that they live in. You want to add anything to that?
No, I think it stands in contrast to the idea of picking up the fractured pieces and making the repair more beautiful than the initial object. This world, these people, this military, rather than repairing and making it more beautiful, they just sand it and paint it over.
Yeah.
They erase where they came from, because they're singularly focused on absolute power, which we know corrupts. Absolutely.
And it's also a little less fitting too. I mean, if you look at the original armor, like the things are just snapped together, and this is more like the Blood Axes, where it's like here, you lost your shoulder piece, just snap it in. It's a little shorter than your last one, but it doesn't matter, you know? So yeah, that was the idea of the military armor.
That's fascinating.
I have one nerdy costume question, just because I want to make sure that I shout it out, just because it's with all of those uniforms and all of the military thing and everything else, and just in general, this movie has some of the best aging dying. It's really good because it's subtle and it doesn't go over. Can you guys talk about your aging dying process? Because I know even in the concept art, it's there, but I was like, doing it in practicality for so many people is insane. So please tell me, or tell the audience about that.
Okay, so our key text, thank you very much for noticing that and for pointing it out. And Sharon Fauvel, who was our key textile artist, who her background is insane, and I hope that if you have a chance to look up close to at some of the costumes, you can really see her and her team's work on display, and also our key craftsperson, Chris Berg. These are incredible artists in their own right, and so their amazing work plus Zack's color processing and lighting process in post really pull apart, intensify contrast at certain hues. So, if something is lighter than, a mid-gray, the contrast will be heightened. And if something is darker than a mid-gray, that contrast is going to be reduced. So knowing that, that's why camera tests are so important, knowing what color is going to do what on camera, and we wanted to make everything look as deep as possible, as almost painterly as possible. The light on other planets and other worlds is not the same as it is on Earth. And we really wanted to make sure that came across with what we were doing, how different fabrics bounce the light, what happened to shadows, emphasize depth, and, kind of create the what exactly am I looking at factor. So that's Sharon Fauvel and Chris Berg, who really turned it out and did a fantastic
Can I share a funny story? So, like, one of my first illustrations I made, like, when you do an illustration or a piece of art, like, you kind of like, it's like this precious thing. And Stephanie's just like, all right, beautiful drawing, but now I want you to just throw mud on it.
Throw it all, yeah.
I want you to just scratch the shit out of it. And then I'd send it back. She's like, no, more.
Yeah.
More. Are you sure? Just more. These people live in the desert, Like, oh, you sure? That was fun. And then towards the end, I got the vision of like, okay, like these military people, their pockets, their stitching, their pockets are not quite straight, nothing is straight. Their pockets are a little off, and the stitching is going this way, and then the other pocket's going the opposite direction. So it's kind of like, towards the end of the film, I started really to get like the vision of what Stephanie was talking about. So,
how long was that preliminary design process? Like, how many weeks were you on this project before principal?
Stephanie question? Yeah, Steph.
We started in October, and we started principal photography in April.
Wow.
So we had quite a lot of time.
Yeah, 6 months.
Yeah. I think that the Christmas, we usually take 2 weeks at Christmas.
Right.
And so there was a lot of time to really like dig into it. And like Jason was saying before, a lot of the concept art is informed by what art department is doing. Like, what are the spaceships looking like?
Sure.
Like, what are the worlds looking like? And so to have that time to be able to respond to and adjust to and all of that was hugely important. Hugely important.
How were you really integrated with the rest of the art department on this? Because I would imagine it would all have to be evolved together.
More Stephanie than me, I would say. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm that annoying girl that is like constantly asking, "What are you guys doing?
Yeah.
Can I see? Let me see. Can you send me?"
In the background, it was nice to see like my the icon I made ended up on the gun handle. Like, you know, like things were being passed on without me knowing anything, and then later on it's like, oh, it's like it was being passed, like I was receiving things from the art department and we were giving things back to them for the costumes and things like that. So
It kind of makes me crazy in films where it doesn't, and I can't even name a specific example of it, and maybe it's just in my own brain, which is probably the case. But when you don't have that integration between the departments, where what the person is wearing, the weapon that they're using, and the environment that they're in seem to be like from 3 different places. So it's really important for me to make sure that we're all talking and helping and sharing.
Well, going back into Zack Snyder's own filmography, I really loved the development of Krypton that we saw at the beginning of Man of Steel, you know, and the costuming of Zod's and Feora, those troops, but then also what Jor-El was wearing, and all that integration of the ships and I mean, it's too bad. I would love to have made a part 1 where the whole thing was set on Krypton, because it was such an interesting, and really interesting environment. And I would imagine, like, when you're integrating all of this stuff with the art department, and you were saying you were showing things to Zack Snyder, you know, every week. Is he the kind of guy that's always coming down to the art department during the 6-month development process before principal?
150%. He's always in the shops and wanting to see, or, you know, like there's a constant communication between Zack and the various shops. So there's never a surprise. You always know, because Zack is the glue. He's the through line. And, you know, as you're talking, you know, he really makes mention of other stuff that he's seen, even if it's not something that's like that they're ready to present or to share. Like Zack will, you know, kind of give the preview, so you know where it's going and like what he's responding to. And
he's an artist, so he's also drawing things for feedback, which is really helpful for artists. If you could just show me what you've read.
He draws every frame of the movie. Literally everything.
How rare that is too, to have a director like Zack that actually can draw and can collaborate and, like Jason said earlier, can bump up something and make it better, or just to see it. He has a very strong vision. And I also appreciate the other thing about him that's pretty cool is like Stephanie said, is the visits, which is he actually wants to. It can be rare with some directors. It's like you never see them, right? They're up in this cloud and they're inaccessible, and that's not Zack. He's very much so like the person that will come to the office and he will come and check on things, and he wants to know who's working and like what your name is and stuff. Like, he's just very collaborative,
right?
And you can tell by listening to what Jason and Stephanie are saying in terms of like they felt like they were a part of a team. It's like that comes from the top. It doesn't go backwards the other way. It trickles down to everybody.
Basically, his visits didn't mean you should hide your stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
Put it under the desk. It was like, oh, he's coming. He's an excitable person, right? He articulates when he likes something maybe a little too much. Like he likes things very, very much. So his presence was like a good thing, not like a hider. Yeah.
Does he throw out other movies or other examples of things as part of, because he would seem to me to be a big fan too? And
sure.
Does he ever like fanboy out on movies you've worked on that he had nothing to do with?
I'm not sure if I would use the verb to fanboy, but he is like a film historian and an aesthetic historian, and he will enthusiastically refer to things that he's experienced or encountered along the way and that have meant something or have kind of inspired an emotion or a feeling that he wants to recreate in a moment. And sometimes it's something as simple as like, you know, this piece of paper, the shape of it reminds me of like it can be. That's one of the reasons why I really love working with him, is the way that he communicates. It's sometimes very specific and sometimes it's very theoretical, and being able to like draw your own conclusion for him to point you in the right direction, and also feel his trust in your ability to take that right direction and find the path that you're meant to forge along the way. And it's a great experience. Like I think about it a lot, of how thankful I am for that.
Well, and you've watched him because you've worked with him before. You know, you both have developed some kind of a unspoken language where you know where each other's coming from and where you want to go, I would imagine.
Yeah, I would say more Stephanie, obviously.
Right, that's what I mean. Yeah, of course.
Can I add one thing? Like with these concepts that we were doing for him, like some costume designers want a character in a T-pose, right, with a gray background, and Zack hated that. Like he wanted to feel the character in a lighting, and like if it was in a scene in the movie where the whole world is on fire, he wants to see the character in a world that's on fire. Because for him, it was more important to feel the character at his core, and then he would trust Stephanie to come up with those little details.
Right.
He wasn't micromanaging those little details. Oh, I don't think that font is. It was just like, this is the feeling I want. You come up with the details, you know.
Right. He also, I mean, he shoots sometimes himself too. Sometimes he's operates the camera, and so he really understands what's in the frame and how were there times when you wanted to build something or make something and he knows that he doesn't need it, as opposed to wanting, there's some directors that just want to have everything, but does he know?
100%. That's really, I think that's a great question, comment, observation, because that is for sure something that makes Zack stand out, is that because he draws every single frame of the film, because he not only, is his own cinematographer, he also operates, and he knows before we get out onto set, he knows exactly what he needs to be able to tell that part of the story. And if he stops by the shop and he sees me with 10 different craftspeople like working on, this fine detail of a shoelace, and he knows that there's never going to be a shot where the feet come out from under the desk, he'll say, they don't even have to have shoes on. Like he'll communicate that, and I'm beyond thankful.
That's amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, it really is helpful.
Yeah, I mean, my background when I first started working in the industry, I was in the art department, and the art department wants to build everything.
Yeah.
And you build, and sometimes like we're never going to turn around in here.
Correct.
You're never going to do a reverse. So but the art department's like, no, we're going to build everything.
It's so good to have a director that said, like, when I was production designing with them, Phil, we're only going to see the corner of this room, and I'm like, great. And like not get on set, and they'd be like, "Wait, where's the other part?" You're like, "Oh my god,"
Right?
What I mean?
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing. I mean, to have it, because some directors they don't know. You know, they'll want a whole, so they can decide on the day.
Get in on the day.
Yeah.
No, it's nice when you have somebody that actually can plan and kind of give direction to the people, and also just make it, because it also gives you, like you said, when you're budget challenged, it gives you a chance to be like, okay, I don't need to work on that, and that budget can go towards making something else awesome.
Yeah, I mean, you can,
and that you can trust that. You can
Correct.
trust
You
that
can trust
because
that it's not going to change.
yeah, here's his storyboards, and yeah, there is no shot. There is no shot that involves like from the waist down. 150%. So I'm going to have it, but it's not going to be as beautifully detailed as the rest of it, and we'll save a lot of hours.
Keep that in mind next time you see it, that half the people might be in boxers.
Yeah.
Not true. But thank you, Jason.
I have a question along the lines, because I know we're getting close. I want to talk about the action sequences and costuming for action, because there's a lot of action in here. So specifically, Sophia's character, as well as Nemesis. There's a lot of action sequences involved in there, and kind of like movement. Can you talk about that a little bit? Because I know Sophia was a dancer. Actually, I know Sophia from the Madonna tour, working with Ariane Phillips, and so like it was kind of a fun thing. So watching her grow has been absolutely amazing.
Her dance videos on YouTube are amazing.
She's incredible. She's the sweetest person. So I shout out to Sophia if you're watching this. But I do want to say that I know that she has needs in terms of the action she has to do, and I want to see like, how did you guys, think about that when you're doing the costumes? And then also the character of Nemesis, I want you to talk about the hat and all that stuff, because it was just really cool. So tell us about the action in this.
Coming from the world of stunts and superheroes, and even in theater, I don't ever want, based on life experience, I do not ever want a costume that I am responsible for creating or contributing to. I don't want that to be a reason why a performer's action is inhibited. So I have spent like way too much time thinking about mobility and different materials and different shapes that will not interfere with the look, which is ultimately the most important thing for filmmakers, and also will not interfere with motion, safety, movement. So it's a really good question, Phil, because it's something that is extremely important and is part of the designing process from the get-go. Take that and consider Sophia an incredible dancer, completely aware of every cell in her body and what it does and how it can move, and feeling fabrics and knowing what those fabrics can do and how they can move. It was like almost like an ongoing conversation with building her cloak, like how the shapes, the actual textiles that we used, her ability to move in it and make it do these things that were so cool. Sculpting the armor, as Jason can remember, we had a budget for a one-size-fits-all armor. So being able to ensure that everybody is going to be able to wear this armor and move their arms together, move their arms up, and not have pieces crash on one another. Helmets, et cetera, et cetera. So it really does, it is an important part of not only the initial design process, but also part of the development process, because we don't ever want our costumes to be the reason why a scene doesn't look as good as it can be.
We also designed the military padding underneath, which you'll see them take off the armor parts, but like even the layer underneath is meant as a stunt cushion from their hard parts, so they can perform. So
I kind of noticed that you guys did there was like some deconstruction of the costumes, in terms of like the Imperium had like their jackets and their uniforms, but then like Atticus had like some cool kind of asymmetrical kind of style line thing on his jacket or something, and then the suspenders. Like there was some really cool kind of layered things where when you take parts of the costume off, you get a whole nother costume. That was really well done. Did you guys kind of plan that out in terms of just like the process?
I'm gonna say that the whole asymmetric jacket thing was entirely Stephanie's idea. I did not draw it.
No, but the like the soft armor and all of that stuff, that was for sure like a group project. Jason did so many studies on different the layer that was under the armor that would protect our stunt performers, and we made that with the help of Justin Raleigh from Makeup Effects, and his shop Fractured helped us build this really cool, it's almost like a vac form foam that looked like bubble wrap, and also like these little triangles that we had our fabric sucked onto so that it became one with it, and it looked, that juxtaposition of something that looks very like tech and future and something that looks very like old and analog and rusty coming together.
Well, I can't believe we've been talking for over an hour. I mean, This is just stunning to me that it's been great to, I know that our producer likes to keep these to an hour, but I could talk with you guys for another hour. Is there anything that we should look forward to, surprises in part 2 that you guys are particularly, that maybe you can give us a little taste of without having the Netflix?
I'll take the hit.
I will say that the part 2, I'm not involved in any of the post-production part, but part 2, I know that what's coming down the pike is equally, if not more exciting, engaging, beautifully delicious to look at than part 1.
All right.
I would say like a lot of the backstory from the characters are really gonna play a part in this one.
Okay. So we get more development.
Yeah, like I think part 1 was collecting these little figurines of rebels, and then part 2 is like really fleshing out. You could tell by the trailer, at least. I hope Zach's doing that. I told him, Zach, if you're watching, no, I'm pretty sure that like part 2 is going to be fleshing out these characters. You get a little bit more of the flashbacks from Titus and the armor I was talking about, and Tarak. That's correct. Yeah, and his backstory as a prince.
Yeah. I think that's all we can say.
Yeah. Anymore. Don't do it.
And no, just kidding. I'll just stop.
The screen is going to go blank after that.
Well, this has been a terrific conversation. I want to thank both Jason and Stephanie for being here, and it's very great to speak with you about this film, and this was great. Now, do you guys have anything else coming up after Rebel Moon Part 2? Are you collaborating again?
You mean after the strike? Terrible strike?
Yeah.
That's what I was about to say. It just feels like a void for a lot of us.
I know. It's like I keep asking people that, but everyone's like, well, we don't even know. The industry really hasn't started back up yet anyway.
No, not yet. Yeah. The answer to that is absolutely there will be something in the future that Jason and I collaborate on. I really enjoyed working with Jason for so many reasons, who he is as a person, so easy to communicate with, and also his skill set, what he is able to do with extreme proficiency is unlike other concept artists that I have worked with in the past. Everything from literally like 3D sculpting the helmets and the armor and all of the like really intricate like filigree work to these beautiful like keyframe like painterly pieces of concept art and the graphic design and so 150% there will be future collaborations. I have no idea what that is at this point in time.
I'm gonna hide my face real quick.
Get it, Jason. Own it.
Wait, now it's my turn, right? So like,
No, well
obviously,
done.
like one of the things I love about Stephanie is like she knows what she wants, and like if I give her 10 options, she hones it to one or two. Like she has a really creative mind of what like to look for, and her attention to detail, especially early on when I was like I mentioned before, creating these really sort of sterile costumes at first, and her telling me to add all these little details like the imperfection of the pockets and the grime and the aging. Like her attention to detail, I think is like amazing, and has made me a better artist, I believe. So of course I would love to work with Stephanie again.
Right. Well, it sounds to me like you guys will be doing just that. That's very exciting. I want to thank you both for coming on the Designing Hollywood podcast. It was really cool to have you. And Philip, it was great having you and working together. We should do more of these collabs.
Definitely. Would love that.
And Philip, are you working on anything now?
No, I think I'm allowed to say I did just do some work on Usher's upcoming Super Bowl show. So that's some work there, and that's pretty much all I can say about that. But that'll be in February, February. And past that, no, I think we're just waiting for the industry to kind of start back up. So we'll see what happens. Yeah.
Well, the three of you, thanks for all of your time, and it was great to have you here on the Designing Hollywood podcast.
Yeah.
Thanks for having us.
And thank you to our very impressive sponsor.
Eastern Costume is a full-service costume house and wardrobe supply company. We specialize in military, police, and civilian wardrobe, ranging from the 1920s to the present day. We have military uniforms ranging from World War I to the present day and can fully customize any of these with insignia, buttons, pins, props, and more. We offer a wide range of props from flight helmets, bulletproof vests, and backpacks to civilian jewelry, hats, and shoes. We have a great team here at Eastern Costume, and our goal is to become an extension of your wardrobe department and facilitate all of your production needs.
A special thank you to founder and executive producer Martika Ibarra, co-founder, costume designer, the legendary Marilyn Vance, and of course, John Campea from the John Campea Show. Thank you to all of our viewers for tuning in, and be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Tune in to the audio version wherever you listen to podcasts. I am, of course, your host, Robert Meyer Burnett, and you can find me on Instagram at rmburnett, or find me on Twitter at BurnettRM, or on YouTube at PostGeekSingularity. Thanks very much. Like, subscribe, and give us your comments. What would you like to see on the channel? Right down below. Thanks very much for watching, and we'll see you on the next episode of Designing Hollywood.